Join our podcast conversation as we share ideas, insights, and information that will educate, inform, and inspire. We will blend our knowledge of online safety and emotional awareness to help you have a better understanding of your child's online world and their emotional responses and well being.
Today is a good one, Sarah.
Yes, it goes right in with the whole theme of our podcast, which well, every topic goes into the whole theme. But what the intro says is having a better understanding of our child's online world and their emotional responses and well-being. Today
Right.
so syncs to that because we're talking about is technology affecting your child's emotional responses?
What do you have to say about that?
There is so much to say about this. I was reading an article about a man who was watching this family at a restaurant, and every single family member, so it was the parents and two children, the entire time were on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to think, okay, when has this been a moment in my life? And so I started to think, okay, there has been times where I've been at a restaurant, Kai has asked something, Kai's our 10-year-old son, and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to quickly Google that. Or my husband's going to quickly Google that. In that moment, someone could look over at our table and think, oh my goodness, they're not even interacting. Like, look at, they're on their phones. However, that's been a moment. Now, in this article, he kept looking back and it was the entire restaurant visit. And then he said he noticed the teenage daughter got a phone call. So she actually got up and left the table. And as she was leaving the table and went to the door to exit, she almost knocked over an elderly couple, had no awareness of it, kept walking because she was so distracted by her phone. So I thought, wow, that's taking it a totally step further. That's not, I'm just quickly Googling something on my phone. Now we're getting back to being mindful in this moment. That's, you're not even, not only aware of yourself, but of the people around you. So there are times where I'm really noticing that self-awareness is being impacted by too much technology,
Mm-hmm.
which we'll get into. Also, self-regulation. Things come so instantly online, or you're playing, if you're a child and you're playing a game and it's not going your way, you're feeling frustrated. Well, you can restart the game, but that's not life. So it can be
Right.
impacting emotional self-regulation. And with that story, it's impacting empathy because you don't even notice the couple that's now impacted by you pushing them over because you're so distracted, you've gone on to the next thing and they're left with an emotion. So emotional intelligence and awareness
Mm-hmm.
can be severely impacted as well with too much.
And there are studies out there that are talking about it. You and I are reading one on psychology today, which I thought was
Mm-hmm.
an interesting
Mm-hmm.
piece. But then
I like
there's
that
what
one.
we observe. To your story, I remember being in a restaurant with my wife, my daughters, and my daughter pointed out a table of six, two parents, three teens, and a grandmother. Everyone was on their device except the grandmother. She looked bored out of her mind because no one would engage with her. So there was food on the table, and there were devices while kids were eating food, and the grandmother was sitting, eating, but then staring and looking around. And my daughter felt bad for the grandmother because she wasn't being engaged. That woman who's been here, who gave all those individuals life and where they are today, is
Mm-hmm.
being ignored because something was more important on that screen. And so the empathy part is huge. And here's what I talk about on a regular basis with my parents. I say, we can wait for all the studies to come out in 2, 3, 5 years from now, or you can process what you see around you and start making changes. So
Mm-hmm.
part of the information I deliver to parents is stuff that I observe, that is told to me by principals, that is told to me by parents. When I interview psychologists, therapists, their real time data, I get a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I deliver because it's real time. It's today. It's what they're seeing. It's not skewed. It's not, there's no
Mm-hmm.
positioning of I'm going to sell a book or I'm going to do, no, no, no. I'm just giving you data. And the data is overwhelming that it is impacting our kids. But,
Mm-hmm.
we've spoken about this in the past. technology is amazing. It requires parental structure. And then we can avoid all of these issues impacting our kids. And you talked about empathy earlier. It's one of the biggest impacts I see of overconsumption of this technology. Attention spans, Sarah. Do you notice? Have you ever watched a video on a recipe? And back in the day, I don't know how long that would be, we could watch a video and we could follow along and we could make something. Now you have to watch it about 30 times because it's going at such a rapid pace. You're not processing it quickly enough, but the attention span is getting shorter and shorter. And the individuals creating, especially on TikTok, want to get as much information out there in the shortest period of time. Why? Because they want you to come back for more and keep getting views. But attention spans are shortening as well. And
Right. Yeah.
no, go
Counterproductive, isn't it?
exactly.
No, I
Exactly.
agree with you. And then that can even come to our presentations. Do you notice the attention spans when you are in schools are shorter?
Okay, so I'm going to give you my data. I actually keep them for when in person. I do not know what's happening in a virtual presentation because I cannot command the room. But in my in-person presentations, I've had teachers, principals say this for years. You got them for 60 minutes. And I will not reduce my presentation. I will keep it at 60. In fact, I struggle to keep it because there's so much information, but I have a captive audience. I have a certain speed that I speak at. They're keeping up the speed. Sometimes it's a bit too quick for them, but I know that is how they like to process information. And I could slow it down, but then I could see body language, which will dictate to me I got to keep, but I actually do keep them for that 60 minutes.
Yes. Yes.
But
And mine for grade 4 to 8 is sometimes just over 60 minutes, depending on, sometimes it can be even slip into the 65, 70. And I've noticed the same thing.
we,
It depends what your engagement is as well.
right, but what I find very interesting about our engagements is that I have information delivery that they're processing, and you have
Right.
audience engagement where they're now responding to something you're saying because I've been part of your audience where they're
Hmm.
getting up and their hands are in the air, you're making them that engagement is, I mean, it's great because they're not only listening, they're responding to and what you're requesting. So they have the ability, but social media is actually almost restructuring the way they're trying to process it.
Mm.
Good news is that you and I can go and talk to them and we got them, which is great. But back on the topic of in terms of what they're processing
Hmm.
and how that's impacting them. I think it's really important that parents understand that the most important component of technological usage is the structure piece because we want kids to have access to television shows, engaging with their friends. You said your son is playing a baseball game right now, which I think is fantastic because he's a baseball
Hmm.
player. So playing that baseball game not only is a consumption time, it's also a understand because he could be playing the game, seeing something on the screen, then apply it later on. So that's not
Right.
consumption. That's actually playing a game that allows you to use your mind, which could apply to you later on. So there's so much positive that could come out of that technological use. What I like to call the mindlessness factor, which is just looking, liking, scrolling. That is what I think is taken away from our kids. If
And to springboard in, just to interject right there, that's where the attention span gets lost.
yeah,
Like right now, when I walked before I came down here, I said, "Kai, are you trying to get drafted by the MLB?" He's like, "Yeah," because that's what he's playing right now, where you actually have to do interviews and get drafted,
very cool. Okay.
and now, so that has a different attention span because now you're like going back to even with presentations, he's interacting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't want him to spend the whole day doing that, but it is different. I agree with you than him scrolling on my Instagram and just watching reel after reel.
Right.
That he has a 5 minute cap. You want to? He's like, oh, I'm just watching hockey, mom. Like he tries to really engage me, and sometimes he's really convincing. Like sometimes kids are so convincing, right? And I'm like, hey, but that's going to have a time limit. All of it has a time limit, but you can play MLB for way longer than you can sit here scrolling on a reel. Because I do find that I notice as a mom, it impacts his focus.
Yeah, and okay, so it's great that you have that structure and you are aware of it, but let's just be honest, some of this technology is being used as a pacifier. which is,
Mhm.
I need you out of my hair for the next hour, go. And what I think the studies eventually will show is that what we fell into the trap of doing because we wanted some peace and quiet and we were busy cooking or cutting the grass is impacting, like the studies have shown, self awareness, self regulation, their social skills, their motivation, because
Mhm.
they're over consuming and it's on a specific platform and they're looking at something repeatedly in very different capacities. And perhaps, as they're processing it, especially given their age, they're not quite understanding what it means or how it can
Mhm.
impact them later on.
And the
We
emotional impact.
Right, and we should be aware of that on behalf of our children because they're not old enough to process that. And if
Mhm.
we see certain mannerisms at the dinner table, one of the things I've always talked about is the most important time you can spend as a family: breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever you can afford to give your family. Let's say it's just dinner. That half hour at the table with, of course, no technology, reading your child's body language, their facial expressions. Have they lost their appetite? Are they not talkative? Are they reserved? Are
Mm.
they slouching? These are all indicators that something is up.
Yes.
What was it? Is it a conversation that they're having, something that they're processing online? That's where parents need to interject and say, something's off here. And then look at it. Okay, you know what? Let's identify. You know what? We've probably given this kid too much screen time, and probably consuming something is impacting how they're responding to us right now.
Mhm.
I think, I've always said this, we go back to parenting. I don't care what the family structure is at home. I respect every home structure, but we have to invest in our children because it's going to impact their emotional well being.
Absolutely. Their emotional well-being and their actual motivation.
Yes.
I find, and this is again, coming from seeing it firsthand, Kai is very athletic. He loves sports. He loves interacting with people. He's an only child, and he loves sports not just because he actually loves athletics, but because he loves camaraderie,
Right.
right? He loves that. And he also will tell you he loves being an only child. So he's like this duality. Yeah, his friends come over that have like multiple siblings and like, oh my goodness, it's quiet here compared to my house. So that being said, if he's just on technology over and over again, he can actually turn into someone who just could be a gamer. He could go either way. He could be like full on sports, here we go, or full on gamer.
Right.
And it depending on what you give him. Because so if you keep him busy, then he just does technology as a sprinkling. If he has nothing else to do, and it's not like there's people around to play with, well, I'll just do technology. And my husband, he's always been a big advocate of this, and I'll give him kudos. George, if you're listening, it's really good on you that he's like, let him be bored.
Yeah.
He'll find something to do if he's bored. And then, but you know what that takes on us as adult, as the guide, the leader, is we have to tap into our emotions of them giving that fight back because we're going to get annoyed by that because they just want to play the game,
Right.
and so it's easy just to give in because you're like, oh, just play it. Or the other thing you said, which is, oh, I have other things I need to do. Now, we've all been there where we have something we need to do and our kids are playing technology. I mean, that's me right now. I have this podcast to do. My son is playing MLB right now. But after I get off, then we're going to do actually he has hockey. So there's going to be, and if he didn't, then there would be, okay, now your time's up with that. Now we're moving on to something else. So I think what you're saying, the boundary and structure, is actually something that my husband's been very adamant on. And I'm full disclosure. This is where I need to be better. I need to be better. We're gonna have a confession. In the car, I need to be better. I need to be better, not just saying, okay, you can just play on my phone. Now, moments, yes, you can play on my phone or play on your iPad. But I find it's too easy to let the whole car ride be you're on your iPad playing a game. Did you see the plane? Well, no, because your nose is face down. Like, of course you didn't see the plane. And I don't want to associate. And I literally just had this conversation with Kai. I said, and this is on me. I said, I don't want you to associate a car ride with playing a game on my phone.
Right.
And that's on me. So I take full responsibility. So this is, and you can tell me if this is a good idea. I'll give a time frame. I'll say, okay, for 5 minutes, and then you need to pass it back. So if there's 5 minutes, then the rest of the car ride, you're just looking out the window or creating conversation, or we're choosing a song on the radio.
I'll make 3 suggestions. If it's a
Yeah, do it.
long road trip, observe and process. If it's the
Mhm.
same road trip to hockey and back and to baseball
Right.
and back,
That's what I'm talking about. That kind
all
of
right,
road trip.
2 suggestions. Number 1, a book. That, you know what, the best place to read is in the car when you're bored and you have to get the hockey. And part of I think if Kai's going to a game, not a practice, mindset of the game. I always taught my
Oh,
daughters
100%.
when
Yeah, I
I took my
agree.
daughters to soccer. Mindset. Okay, what position? What are your strategies? I want you to envision yourself. So it's preparing, but if just practice, book. But if it's going to be a device, let's say it's an hour drive, a project, say, Kai, I want you to look up this particular topic. I want you to see what comes up. Read me a few of the headlines in terms of
Oh,
whatever comes up in Google or whatever search engine you use. And then I will approve one, click on it, and I want you to read it and then quietly, and then summarize, what did you just learn? So now they're learning something new, and it will engage you and your husband in conversation as you're driving. So it's an electronic device, but it's not
oh,
mindlessness. It's, I'm learning something new by reading something that perhaps was making the news recently, something that you've been talking about and you want some further clarification on. Use it as an educational tool, because a screen in a car as an educational tool is way different than a screen in a car that is consumption, that is
mhm.
scrolling and liking. And there's different ways that
I
that screen
like
can be
that.
used. So long as it's productive, he could be back there for 20 minutes reading it. Although I think reading an article on a phone is very difficult. But if, let's say he's got an iPad, extend your Wi-Fi to him, not Wi-Fi. You're going to create a hotspot. Let his iPad connect to your hotspot. Find that article, read it, put the device away, disengage the hotspot, and now, Mom, here's what I learned. Here's what I want to talk about. And now we're all getting involved because you guys are driving. He's learning, and now you're engaging. So it
I
doesn't have
love
to be
that. That's a great
negative.
idea.
It doesn't have
No,
to be negative.
and
It
it's
could be
right. It's
positive.
just switching the framework around,
That's right.
and then you're learning something, then you're engaging. And I did find, so today we were just we together went to an appointment, and uh so I did the 5 minutes, came no more. And at first he was like, oh my, I just gonna, oh. That's
Right.
kind of my interpretation of what he sounded like. And I went back to what we talked about in the last podcast, which I said you can be disappointed. I
I
get it.
remember that.
You can
I
be
remember.
disappointed, right? And so then but we're still putting the phone away.
Yeah.
And do you know, within 10 minutes, he was like, Mom, let's play I Spy, which is actually very difficult while you're driving because things pass by so quickly. I spy something green, a tree. There it is.
Right.
No, it's something way back there. Well, okay, I missed it. But it was a different engagement. If I wouldn't have gone through the setting up the boundary, hearing his complaints, validating, you can feel disappointed, but we're still, then he would never have turned on to I Spy, because it went back to what my husband said, which is when he's bored, he'll find something else to do.
Right.
And I think it motivates them to find something else to do, which goes back into, we want our kids to have this creative brain, problem solving brain.
Yeah.
And so technology, yes, has wonderful things that can help in that. There's wonderful, we've talked about this before, there's wonderful sleep apps and meditation apps and
hmm
mindfulness apps and uh, workouts and wonderful things on there. But I go back to what you've always said, which is structure and boundary. Structure and boundary. And that's parenting through and through. Structure, boundary, holding the boundary, and knowing they're allowed to have an emotional reaction to it,
hmm
and that's okay. Because in that moment that they have an emotional reaction and you are aware of it, you say, oh, I see that you're disappointed. doesn't change the boundary, but I see you're disappointed, and that's okay. I get disappointed too when things aren't going the way I want them to go. We are teaching them self-awareness. That's us modeling emotional intelligence. And then when they are upset and they have their mini tantrum or whatever, and they take some deep breaths or they walk away and come back to the conversation, they're learning self-regulation right there. But if
Right.
we never set up the structure and boundary, we are taking away their ability to learn how to self-regulate.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, this is important part of
And
parenting.
again, I go back to it. We have to make that investment as a parent into our child. We're all busy. We all have
Oh
very
yeah,
busy schedules.
very
But
busy.
please don't allow the technology to replace our responsibility as a parent. The reason I love engaging with you in terms of what our level of expertise is because although tech is amazing, we're reading these kinds of studies of how it's kind of taken away from that emotional component, you bring up, let them feel sad, let them be bored. And I tell parents that is such an important those are important qualities in life that they're not being allowed to learn and to feel because they're so consumed. And it's so important that they understand, let them cry, let them be bored,
Hmm.
let them express, because they will only learn later on in life how to deal with that if they've
Hmm.
experienced it. Because if they don't learn until later on, I don't even know where this could be going.
It's
The
devastating later on.
they're
It's
okay.
the end of the world later on because you've not set them up for, I call it a almost like a referral point, okay, in your brain, where
Right,
you can go back and say, oh my gosh, that was super painful, but I got through it. Oh my gosh, that was really upsetting and I was so frustrated, but I got through that too. So
right,
then your brain has a point at which you can go back and say, oh, challenges are chapters of your life, not your whole story. But if we fix and change, and our goal as parents is to only keep them in this state of whatever gives them instant gratification and happiness and joy, we're not teaching them to become an adult that can move with and through emotions in a healthy way. They're going to look for that quick fix, that outside, I need
right,
someone to fix and change and make this my joy again. No, 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 that's within you. So I believe that confidence has to be with inside you. It has to be that inner knowing of I can be at peace with me, whether it's I mean, it's a combination, self acceptance, self love, self regulation, knowing that I have tools in my toolbox to help me move with and through emotions that challenges bring. I
right.
mean, and that starts with what we're talking about, which is structure and boundaries. And I think if we can remember as parents that that's our focal point, our end result is to create kids that become adults that are emotionally aware, they can self-regulate, they can become confident and bounce back from challenging times. And that is the skills we're setting them up for. So they're allowed to be disappointed. They should be disappointed. Whenever you set up a boundary, even us as adults, when you set up a boundary, even with a family member, oh, tonight's not a good night. Well, the other person on the other line of the phone does not agree with your boundary. Tonight's a great night for them. Why isn't it for you?
Right. That's a good point.
But what if your job is just to say, no, well, I get it. And you can be disappointed, but it still doesn't work for me tonight. We have to arrange it another day.
Right,
And then that becomes a skill in itself.
right. And I think the relationships you build with those individuals, if you had to say, let's say you call me, hey Paul, I know we have plans for lunch on this day. Sorry, this tournament just popped up. Although I was okay with it, I'm understanding. I think our relationship tells me, Sarah, no problem. Enjoy the. I understand how to deal with that. But
Hmm.
if you're not, you could be blindsided with, wait a minute, I had to set up and all that. So yeah, that response, you need to know the individual, and that's with the relationship. You need to understand that life throws curveballs at you, and you need to know how to deal with it. Kyle will like that analogy, and that Everything is not going to be perfect because remember, online, everything is perfect. Look at my world. Look at what I'm doing. Look at all this stuff. Look how happy I am.
Yes.
And that's not the real world. And they need to learn about disappointment. They need to learn that plans can be
Hmm.
canceled at the last second. I just canceled plans with my buddy, and we've known each other for over 30 years. We had plans to get together this Friday, and my daughters are surprising us, believe it or not, on Friday. They're taking us out to dinner. We don't know what's happening. So I called them. I said, hey, I know we had these plans, but I didn't even know about this. He's like, no problem. When do you want to reschedule? That's the relationship we have. We
Hmm.
weren't
Hmm.
upset. I mean, he planned it. I planned it. I never advised my daughters because, we don't usually tell them, hey, we got dinner plans unless it gets closer. But they had this plan. They were going to surprise us. Everything worked out. Why? Because of relationships and we understand each other. And it,
And
I
that's
think
the empathy part.
exactly,
And
exactly.
I love that you brought this up because I wanted to, before we end in time, talk about the difference between online and offline. And I notice even that piece that you're talking about in how you and your friend just had empathy for one another and said, oh my gosh, and then plans changed. And maybe there was a slight moment of disappointed. He was like, oh shoot, I was really looking forward to seeing you, but I know you're not like doing this maliciously, just like
Hmm.
ending play. Right, there's this level of flow and empathy that you've just talked about. Don't you notice, and I've even noticed this with Kai, how you engage online, even when during the pandemic, he's online playing interactive games. They're building Fortnite worlds. Here we go. And it's great. It serves a purpose. But
Right.
how they talk and interact is very different online than when I see him in person with his friends. And the level of empathy in person shifts because it's a real person as opposed to, you know, just I'm online. Oh my gosh, you didn't build that thing right, and da, da, da. Whereas if you're in person, your wording probably would be different. Just like if you were just a text, I bet you didn't just text your friend that you couldn't get together, but you phoned them.
Yep. And
So that's different right there then.
and I have structured my life around if I read an email, if I see a text, and I know that the response could be misinterpreted, I'm a phone call away. Do you know that every parent I've assisted and the frequency of me assisting parents has just skyrocketed? I never, the request comes in through a DM, it comes in through an email, and my response is, I'd be more than happy to assist you. What's your phone number? I phone every parent and principal personally because nothing replaces the voice, the empathy that they're going to hear from me, the fact that I'm there to support them, because the response could be misinterpreted because they're emotional, they're
Mm-hmm.
not understanding, they don't know Paul Davis and my style, and so to me, that form of communication will never be replaced. Email is convenient, texting is convenient, social media is convenient. I get that, but when it comes to a real life human interaction component, I get the request. I go immediately to a phone call. I've met parents one on one at cafes, believe it or not, last summer in their backyards. Why? Because it needed that. It was such a sensitive issue that they needed human interaction, and
Mm.
nothing will replace that. So, yes, the engagement online is far different than the engagement one on one. And I think that is the key to how you and I deal with our audience is that they see us as human beings, not
Mm-hmm.
as a figure behind a screen. And that communication is so vitally important, which I've always stated will never ever be replaced. And I go
Mm-hmm.
back to what I've said forever. Technology is amazing, but get out there and play, kids. And that's important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And interact and the art of communication in person,
Yeah.
and teaching and modeling to our kids how important that is, and setting up our own boundaries with our technology so that we are modeling that to our kids.
Yep.
Again, not always easy to do, but important to do and a must do so that we teach them, yeah, it's an accessory. It's not replacing people. And this is what I say to Kai, and as we end, people are more important than technology.
Love that.
So look at them, honor them when you're talking to them. And that is showing that you are interested in what they have to say.
Right.
And now there's an interaction happening. And this is an ongoing journey, but people are more important than technology.
100%. That's an excellent way to end. Sarah, always great talking to you.
Love talking to you, Paul.
Until our next
Until next
podcast.
time.
Bye, everyone.
This is what we know.
This is what
Bye.
this is what we know. Bye.